Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. And, folks, we are inching towards that regular season. When we started this show about 2 months ago, it was just the dark days of the offseason. Actually, about 3 months ago. So now to just be a couple days away from first pitch, where the Rockies take on the Marlins, it just feels like these final days have actually taken the longest to get through spring. But look, we've had a ton of news and a ton of different transactions made by the Rockies as they're trying to finalize this roster to be ready to go in Miami here in just a couple of days. And look, Seth Halverson is going to be one of those names that will not be on the opening day roster. He'll start in Albuquerque. And look, this is a move on a pitching prospect that made his debut last year and had 11 saves. His ERA was just under 5. And coming into spring, he was one of those names where there was some maybe hopes and expectations that not only would he crack that opening day roster, but that he'd be a key contributor for the Rockies this year. But look, this is a bullpen that I think will be better than what it was last year. And Halverson just did not have a good spring. I think he finished his ERA this spring was like a 21 ERA. He did not have his stuff clicking this spring. And so, look, if you're going to struggle and then have a lot of issues, I think that is exactly what needs to be done is start your season in AAA, regain some of that confidence before you're called back up, because I'm sure this is a temporary spot for Halverson, and that he will get an opportunity to pitch again at the major league level. But based on just what we saw from him, and honestly a couple other relievers, the Rockies just can't have guys falling behind, can't have guys who are getting absolutely blown up. And if you're getting blown up like that in spring, it's just better to start at the AAA level. So definitely the right move there, as the Rockies made a couple of different moves. They also have decided that Troy Johnson is going to be on that opening day roster. That's due to Freeman's injury that we have talked about at length on the show. Tyler Freeman has been dealing with a bit of a back injury throughout spring, something that was even reported during the winter, or it was reported that he was struggling with it during the winter. And so this is a nagging back injury that just hasn't gone away. He's played a little in the spring, but overall Freeman just not able to be healthy come opening day. And so for Johnson, it's a bit of a full circle because the Rockies actually picked him up from the Marlins, and now he has a chance to play his former team, which it feels fitting. The Rockies made a couple of offseason moves. They picked up Johnson. They traded for TJ Rumfield. Edward Julian was traded for. All three of those guys are on the opening day roster. And I would argue two of those three guys I feel pretty darn confident about. Johnson had a really strong spring. He bats .375 in the spring, which, again, it doesn't mean everything, but to have confidence, to show that you are a capable bat, is really important for a team that just desperately needs it, that needs solid hitting, and Johnson provided that. There was a lot of arguments that he could have been the starting first baseman this year, and although I think Rumfield has most likely earned that spot, there's still an argument for Johnson because he can play in the outfield, he can play first base. He gives you that utility aspect that the Rockies have looked for in some of these players. And so like Ryan Ritter, like Tyler Freeman, and now like Troy Johnson. So obviously exciting for him. And it's obviously a different look because I think back in December, if you would have told Rockies fans that there's going to be some open roster spots, you probably would have thought maybe Zach Veen. I'm sure a small contingent would have said Adele Amador. Maybe some of these other names, but Johnson and Rumfield absolutely earned a spot on this opening day roster, and they deserve to be with the team for this first series against the Marlins. We'll see what the usage looks like. We will see what that opening day lineup actually looks like, and what Johnson will be in terms of, hey, is this a guy that's just going to be giving you an at bat or two? Or, hey, he's going to be starting a couple of these games at first or somewhere in the outfield. So, really interesting stuff. Obviously, really happy for Troy Johnson. And And also a solid move from the front office. They got Johnson, they got Rumfield. Now these are two guys that could possibly be starting on opening day. So cheap moves that you yield actually some results. That is something to take away there. And obviously on the grand scale of things, it's not huge, but is important to note because really quick, Paul De Podesta did send out a letter. Hey, we're building something, we're growing something. This year's going to be a climb, was essentially the note he sent to all Rockies fans. But you just do feel at least somewhat solid about the vision of what this front office is trying to do. And when you see moves like that and can get some solid play out of guys that weren't being used elsewhere, that should yield some confidence. And that's exactly what this front office did with Troy Johnson, Rumfield, and others. So solid moves leads to guys playing for the Colorado Rockies. And if they can be net positives going into this opening series as well as for the rest of the season, that should be seen as a pretty big deal. And let's talk about the final spring game. Look, I'm recording Tuesday evening. The Rockies have finished up playing the Detroit Tigers, where they lose 11-8. Some key takeaways, Sugano, who I'll talk about. I said he stars. He did give up 2 runs, but I do think overall a positive outing for probably the most interesting signing that the Rockies made. We'll, again, talk about that a little bit more. Jimmy Herget, though, he gives up 3 more runs in this game and balloons his ERA of the spring to a 10 ERA. Really an interesting name there because he was a solid contributor last year for the Rockies. He just gave up 2 hits, 3 earned runs, a walk, and no strikeouts in that 10.45 ERA to end the spring. Brennan Bernardino also gave up 2 runs, 4.76 ERA for him to end the spring. I do feel a little bit more confident about him, but you had to feel confident because he's the only lefty to start, most likely, in the bullpen for the Rockies. Agnos also gave up a pair of runs. There was some positives, though. Look, Willie Castro's bat has been red hot. He finishes over batting 500. Brett Sullivan as well hits another home run. He finishes over a batting average of 410 or 400, finishes at 410. And then Goodman and Edward Julian, both kind of what you want to see going into that first weekend of the season, where they both got 2 hits in their final game. So good to see a little bit coming from those 2 bats where they've been pretty cold in the spring. Hunter Goodman, more surprising than Edward Julian, but both of those guys are going to be playing come opening day. So you really need to see some production from those guys. So solid to see that. Overall, though, the Rockies, look, they had a lot of positive and nice surprises. I've focused on some of the negative, and I've focused on some of the positive. But really to round it up on this segment, the key positives this spring, Kyle Karros, huge positive, and he earned his spot as the starting third baseman, in which when they signed Castro, there was a lot of conversations. Hey, Willie Castro, he's probably going to play at third and Freeman at second or Julian at second. Karros created a competition where the competition is now happening elsewhere because he locked up the third base position. So really positive spring from him. We've talked about Rumfield, and we've talked about Troy Johnson. We saw some positive flashes from guys like Zach Agnos. Kyle Freeland had a great spring. And Brett Sullivan, also a really positive spot for this spring. So look, there were some guys that really stepped up this spring that can have you feeling at least somewhat confident about the lineup going into the year, have you feeling decent about the bullpen. And we'll see about this starting rotation. I really am not sold on these guys. I've talked about, we've talked about Feltner, of the struggles of Feltner and Lorenzen up and down, and now Tomoyuki Sugano. Probably the most interesting signing that the Rockies made, just because, look, when he came to Major League Baseball, there was a lot of hype around him. Then he struggled a ton in Baltimore. And the Colorado Rockies said, you know what? Let's just throw some of that at the wall and see if it sticks. In Sugano's final start of the spring, he goes 4 1/3, gives you 4 strikeouts. He does have 3 walks and 2 earned runs. Overall, though, felt pretty solid about his final outing. His off-speed stuff was looking pretty nasty, and you can find clips of those strikeouts. Look, if that can be working well for him, that will be a big deal. But some pitches just don't work well at Coors Field, and so he's just going to be interesting because what will the off-speed pitches look like, and how will they carry while pitching at Coors Field? If he can be successful, though, that just goes into this resume of the front office. And if it doesn't work, it's really no harm, no foul, because this isn't a guy that was getting looked at from a ton of different organizations. He had to shell a bunch of money at. Look, if it's 1 year and he struggles and you don't sign him again, so be it. But I really do like, I guess you could call it the aggressiveness of this front office to get 3 veteran starting pitchers, to make these younger guys have to earn it. I've shared maybe my uncertainty about Ryan Feltner, but it made sense for why he is also starting, because that gives you 5 veteran pitchers now at this point, with Feltner, Freeland, and obviously these 3 guys that the Rockies brought in over free agency and now into the spring. So for Sugano, I mean, expectations aren't overly high, but the overall interest or that level of intrigue is, can Sugano figure it out? Because the pressure of pitching in Baltimore, where they expect to be good and they had a really bad year, there's real no pressure in Colorado. The pressure he's feeling is, hey, if I pitch poor enough, there's Dollander in the bullpen, and some guys at the AAA level that would love to have my spot. That's the pressure he will feel. He will not feel the pressure of, every game needs to be a win because we're competing for a wild card spot or a playoff spot. Just not the place that the Rockies are in. Unless maybe things get weird and the Rockies are in August or just a few games back. Do I think that's happening? No, I don't. But sometimes it's fun to believe, and that's all you can really do. But again, I find this Sugano signing just so interesting because who knows what it will turn into, and it's really a low risk, medium-sized reward, right? But if it can turn into something, and if he can give the Rockies' new front office some solid data of how to pitch at Coors Field, I think that's going to be a big part. And I think that's part of why they signed him, because he is different than what the Rockies have. So with that, we end another Rockies Daily. We get one day closer. Look, folks, if you're listening, it's probably Wednesday morning, Wednesday evening. Maybe you just brush your teeth. Maybe you just kiss your wife goodbye, or your boyfriend goodbye, or whoever you're kissing goodbye. You just said, I want to put on Rockies Daily. Thank you so much for listening. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day. And look, we're just a few days away from opening day. So get ready. Get ready for Rockies baseball because it is here. And I'm pretty darn excited for it. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe. Thank you again so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow.